Hello everyone, Blind Metal Gamer here with you once again, and it is time for a bonus episode of the Blindside Podcast, where in this episode I'm going to discuss something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. And for this one, yes, you're just going to hear me. Kyra is not going to be with me for this. This is a bonus episode. And in this episode, I would like to discuss the accessibility of Souls-like video games. Yes, you heard that correctly. I'm going to be discussing the accessibility of Souls-like video games and describing my experiences of playing a game called Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. And I'm going to be describing how this genre can be made accessible. I've done a blog about this, and I wanted to do this in podcast form. That way I could get more listeners and possibly more people to listen to what I'm trying to say here. Now, I'm going to discuss, starting off, the Souls genres games have improved as far as accessibility by allowing difficulty options, which is a good start, but there's a lot more that can be done. So, to begin with a little history, FromSoft released the Dark Souls series and Bloodborne, and these games are known for having no difficulty options. So when you start the game, you get what you get. Neo is like this, and so is Neo 2. Now, these games are not accessible for blind and low vision players because they require sighted assistance. Now, for me, an accessible game must be playable fully by a blind or low vision player without sighted assistance. How can this be done, you ask, for a Souls-like? Well, I'm going to explain how I think it can be done, and I'm going to start with the following. Audio. And for this category, I'm going to talk about menu narration, screen reader support, etc. So for this, the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S and PC all have screen readers you can get. So the PS5 and Xbox Series X have them natively. So what the developers could do to leverage this for accessibility is make your game support these screen readers and use these screen readers by default. When the player starts up the game, it would read out loud, do you want to enable the screen reader? Yes or no. Select yes, and the entire game menus, I'm talking the main menu, options, skill trees, tutorials, things you can pick up, etc., would be read to the player aloud. Now, another thing that would be good as far as audio accessibility to make Souls-likes more accessible is audio cues for things such as parrying, blocking, when an enemy will attack you with a non-blockable attack, and things like that. So that pretty much covers the audio side of things of what I'm going to say. Now I'm going to move on to gameplay. Now for gameplay, again, my thoughts are maybe, okay, don't sacrifice the challenge for those that want it, because I know there are a group of players out there that love their Souls-likes to be challenging, engaging, and punishingly hard. But for those that don't, and for our purpose to make a Souls-like accessible for blind and low vision players, my thought and concept is allow for either sliders to adjust the combat difficulty individually, maybe slow down the game speed. Keep your audio cues, keep your screen reader and things, but give the option to slow that speed down during combat. That way, players can react to things such as parrying, dodging, blocking, incoming attacks, etc. And really quick, to circle back on the audio piece of the screen readers, let's say you have an ability to finish off your opponent. Let's say you are finishing your opponent and you're able to do a very brutal death move after a parry, right? The button R1 or RB or whatever would pop up. The screen reader would say, press whatever button to finish your opponent or do a critical strike. And by doing that, the player would know to press that button. My inspiration for this idea is Marvel's Spider-Man 2, where the screen reader in that game reads everything. I'm talking when to push what button to push. If they could incorporate that into a Souls-like and Souls-light, that would really help as far as accessibility for the blind and low vision gaming community. Now, back to gameplay. Another thing that I'm going to suggest for gameplay accessibility is navigational assist. Now you're probably thinking, oh my god, Blind Metal Gamer, what are you thinking? What are you thinking, my man, my blind gaming man? Well, my thought process is this. Again, this wouldn't defer the challenging combat, and it wouldn't be mandatory. These would be options you, the player, could set yourself in the options menu. So for navigational assist, my concept I'm thinking is you would either click the left or right stick, and the navigator would point you in the direction of your destination that you have pin dropped on the map. Or another thought, and this is what Diablo 4 is doing, and I'm looking forward to this, audio navigational assistance. Now how this should work is you pin drop your location, you have audio navigation set on, you would hear a click, 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 or ping, or some sort of audio cue, and it would get louder and more frequent as you get closer to your objective. I know Marvel Spider-Man 2 does this with the point of interest ping, and with the auto lock for pointing the camera where your objective is. So those are all good options. You could combine them. Another to make it more accessible. Another thing that I'm going to discuss now as far as gameplay is fully remappable controls. Now this is because let's say the default buttons are the top shoulder buttons, your L1, R1 or RB, L2 or LT, R2 or RT, respectively. Let's say you cannot use those buttons for the actions you needed just for whatever reason. You should be able to fully customize your control set to meet those needs. So if you need, say, the square and triangle button, for example, for weak and strong attacks, the circle button for parrying, and the X button for dodging, or you could swap X and circle around, you should be able to have the option to fully remap the controls to your needs. That way, it will not only help those that are blind or visually impaired, but those with motor disabilities as well. Now, we're going to jump to cutscenes. I know this is kind of odd for me talking about why cutscenes. These aren't full of lore. Well, with Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, there are cutscenes. Okay, I like that they're voice acted. Now, for the games that do have voice acted cutscenes, that is awesome. Now, as for what would make this even better and more accessible for the blind and low vision gaming community would be audio description or descriptive audio. I know games like The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, Mortal Kombat 1, Marvel Spider-Man 2, the upcoming Star Wars Outlaws all have these. Now, the reason why these would make a Souls-like game more accessible is if the game does have cutscenes that are voice acted to progress the story. That way, the blind and low vision gamer or gamer without sight will know what's going on. This also is great for people with cognitive disabilities because it will help them as well to understand what's going on in the cutscene. Now, another thing, and I know I'm veering off topic here a little bit because I know this is for gamers without sight, but I want to touch on subtitles, captions, speaker tags, etc. But give the ability to make that subtitle background fully 100% black, be able to adjust the color of the font of the subtitles and speaker tags, and then be able to adjust the size of the font and the type of font for the subtitles and speaker tags. That way, players who are deaf or hard of hearing will know who's speaking when and what's going on as well. Now, I'm going to discuss the next item in the list here, and that is overall as far as accessibility in terms of why I think they're not accessible at the moment. And I think the reason this is because the developers are getting there, yes, but they're not quite there yet. I mean, it's coming. And I'm hoping that this podcast will educate you, the developers of a Souls-like or Souls-like game, in making these more accessible. So with that quick break, I'm going to go to the next item on the accessibility checklist, and that is sound. Now, I know I've discussed audio previously, but I want to discuss sound, like in-game environmental cues, stuff like that, as well as QuickTime events. I'm going to combine these a little bit. So, as far as sound and in-game events, like, I don't know, let's say you're walking along the path and there's a fire, okay? And let's say it's a bonfire, just for example. You go there, the screen reader says bonfire, press whatever button to save or to open menu. You would know where the bonfire is, where the when to save or whatever, and all of that. And then you would also have your enemies walking around and talking or whatever, trying to find you to attack. So you've got those sound cues, which are awesome. They're already implemented. Now, another thing I'm going to discuss real briefly here is quick time events, or QTEs. Now, if a Souls-like or Souls-like game does have these, there should be the option for auto-completion. Now, this is that so that way those who cannot see or those who have trouble with quick time events or QTEs don't have to worry about it. They can just, it'll play out like a cutscene, it'll be done, and you're back in the action. Boom. Next, I'm going to discuss another gameplay element that I didn't discuss earlier, and that is puzzles. I know that some of those games do have puzzles, and I think there should be the option to skip these altogether. I know The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 has this, Spider-Man 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2 has this, and I know Marvel Spider-Man 1 had this as well. And I'm hoping that they will add, that they would have that as well as an option for accessibility for Souls-like and Souls-likes, because although I know these games are primarily focused on combat, some games like Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, I'm going to use that as my example because that's what I'm kind of playing right now, is one that I know does rely on platforming and puzzles. So to have assistance such as puzzle skipping and then traversal assistance for the platforming would be a great thing. Now, some things I know that are already in Souls-like and Souls-likes are auto-target lock. That's great. That way you won't have to worry about that. But again, what would make it even better is when you lock onto a target or a target is locked for you, you would hear a sound like a click or like a cling sound to know you're locked onto a target and getting ready for a battle. Now, as far as I'm going to move into the next subject, combat. Now, I know earlier I discussed slowing down the gameplay for combat so you can time parries, blocks, etc., which is awesome, but I think what would make combat even more accessible for blind and low vision players or cognitive disabilities, this would fall all the way across the board, is the ability to fight one enemy at a time. I know you're thinking, oh, blind metal gamer, you have lost your mind. You have lost it. Why only one? Again, these are only options, okay? So you don't have to have these if you don't want them. So for this, my concept that I'm thinking about is the enemies would be, let's say there's two, okay? There's two enemies on screen, so instead of both of them attacking you, you would focus on that one sole enemy. And then when you defeat that enemy, the target would shift to the next enemy, and you would defeat that one. And then when both enemies are defeated, you would resume your exploration with all the other features, the navigational assist, etc., that I've talked about. This would greatly help as far as combat accessibility, because when there's a lot of enemies on screen, that would help as far as focusing on the combat. Now, as far as bosses, I'm pretty sure that in Souls-likes there might be some that have multiple enemies. What I would think would be good for this is, again, focus on the main enemy. But let's say that boss spawns a general, okay? For example, let's say this boss spawns another enemy, you gotta take him out. Your target would focus on that new enemy. The boss would still be there, chilling out, doing his or her thing, doing whatever, and then it would give you the chance to defeat that new enemy or group of enemies, go back to the boss, and it would resume where it left off. So there wouldn't be any type of unfair deaths or anything like that. So you would be able to focus on the task you need to focus on to successfully beat the boss. Now, again, these would be options. These would not be mandatory features. Oh, Blood Metal Gamer wants the Souls-like games to be watered down. No. These would be optional in the options menu under accessibilities, and the screen reader would be the thing that would come on at the beginning to let blind and low vision players know it's there, and they can have it on or off if he or she or they wish. So that rather is going to kind of conclude this little mini episode of how a Souls-like game can be made accessible for the blind and low vision community, or more accessible as a whole. I hope everybody enjoys listening to this episode of the Blindside Podcast. If you would like, and if you're on Spotify and following, feel free to follow so you don't miss a single episode. And when this does drop, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section on Spotify or YouTube. Let's have a conversation about this topic and try to improve the accessibility of Souls-like video games. So, with that being said, I've been your host, Blind Metal Gamer, saying so long, everyone, and peace out.